The Today Show studio was alive with the familiar hum of pre-show activity, a controlled chaos that always preceded the cameras going live. Stagehands adjusted lighting and microphone levels, producers huddled around monitors, and the audience shuffled in their seats, buzzing with anticipation. They knew a celebrity guest was scheduled for today, and whispers circulated throughout the room. Valerie Bertinelli was appearing, and she was expected to discuss her career, her personal life, and her latest memoir. The energy was electric but tinged with an unusual edge, a subtle tension that only those who had spent years in television could feel. There was something in the air, something that suggested this wouldn't be a standard, polished morning segment. Valerie Bertinelli entered the studio with the poise and confidence of someone who had spent decades in front of cameras. Every movement was deliberate, every gesture measured, yet there was an undeniable warmth in her smile that seemed to put the audience at ease. She wore a pastel blouse that matched the cheerful morning aesthetic, paired with tailored slacks, projecting both professionalism and approachability. Her hair was perfectly styled, yet she exuded an effortless charm that made the carefully curated appearance feel natural. Behind that charm, however, her eyes betrayed a flicker of anticipation, a readiness for whatever the segment might demand. Valerie had learned over the years that live television could be unpredictable, and she was prepared to handle it with grace, but also with firmness. Hoda Kotb, radiant in her signature morning anchor attire, greeted Valerie with her trademark warmth and enthusiasm. Her voice carried across the studio with practiced cheerfulness as she said, "Valerie, it's so wonderful to have you here today. We are so excited to talk about your memoir and everything you've been up to." Valerie returned the smile, shaking Hoda's hand firmly. "Thank you, Hoda. I'm really glad to be here. It's been a long journey, and I'm looking forward to sharing it." The cameras rolled, capturing every detail, and the audience clapped politely, their excitement building. On paper, the scene was the perfect morning television moment: celebrity meets beloved host, discussion of new projects, light-hearted banter. But as soon as Hoda asked the first question, it became apparent that this segment would not be so simple. Hoda leaned forward, a friendly but probing tone in her voice. "Valerie, your memoir covers some deeply personal topics: your relationships, your health, and some of the challenges you've faced in your career. Some readers have suggested that perhaps you've sugar-coated certain parts for public consumption. How would you respond to that?" Valerie's smile remained polite, but the edge in her voice was unmistakable. "Hoda, I wrote my memoir to tell my story honestly. There are difficult moments I relive with pain, and I didn't shy away from those. But it's my story, and I have every right to tell it my way." The audience shifted in their seats, sensing the subtle tension that was beginning to emerge. Hoda's eyes flickered, catching the nuance of Valerie's response, and she pressed further, her tone still warm but with a sharper edge. "Of course, but some would argue that sharing selectively can create a certain image, one that might not fully reflect reality. How do you navigate the balance between honesty and privacy?" Valerie leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on her knees, her expression firm. "Hoda, honesty doesn't mean sharing every single detail of your life. It means sharing what's meaningful, what can help others, and what reflects who you are. If someone interprets that as me trying to protect my image, that's their perspective. It doesn't change my truth." The audience murmured softly, some nodding in agreement. There was a palpable tension in the room, amplified by the knowledge that this was live television. Cameras continued to pan across Valerie and Hoda, capturing every glance, every micro-expression. Valerie's composure was flawless, but the intensity in her gaze made it clear she was unwilling to be pushed beyond the boundaries she had set. Hoda tilted her head, maintaining her professional curiosity. "But some critics suggest that certain anecdotes in your memoir may have been dramatized. In your own words, how do you respond to those critics?" Valerie's lips pressed together momentarily, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the chair. Her voice was calm but carried unmistakable authority. "Critics will always exist, Hoda. That comes with living a public life. But my experiences, my journey, and the lessons I've learned are real. If people want to dissect them for drama, that's their choice. I'm not here to defend my life to strangers. I'm here to share it authentically." The audience reacted audibly, a ripple of whispers spreading across the studio. The subtle tension thickened, an invisible current running through every corner of the room. Hoda blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the intensity of Valerie's answer. This wasn't a standard celebrity interview. Valerie wasn't simply answering questions, she was asserting control over her narrative with unwavering confidence. Hoda leaned back slightly, choosing her next words with care. I hear you, Valerie, but some could interpret your responses as evasive, as if you're avoiding accountability. You discuss personal struggles and setbacks. How can you assure your audience that your story is fully authentic? Valerie's jaw tightened, a small but noticeable gesture of determination. She exhaled slowly, her hands gripping the edge of the chair, and spoke deliberately. I take full accountability for my life and my actions. I'm not here to be perfect, and I'm not here to fit someone else's expectations. I'm here to be honest, to share my experiences, and to offer insight and hope. That's the focus of this conversation. The audience was silent now, captivated by the directness of Valerie's words. Cameras lingered on her, catching every detail, the slight narrowing of her eyes, the set of her shoulders, the unwavering confidence she radiated. Hoda's professional smile remained, but the energy between the two women had shifted. The usual rhythm of a morning interview had dissolved into something raw and charged. Valerie leaned back in her chair, her expression steady, eyes locked on Hoda. If the goal is to have a conversation, then let's have one. But if the goal is to challenge me or push me into defensiveness for the sake of television drama, I'm not participating. I am done answering questions that do not respect my story. The moment Valerie Bertinelli stepped off the set, the Today Show studio was caught in a suspended state, as though time had paused to process what had just occurred. Cameras continued rolling, capturing Hoda Kotb frozen in place at the anchor desk, a flicker of surprise and uncertainty crossing her usually composed face. The audience, initially buzzing with excitement for a light-hearted morning segment, fell into a tense hush, whispering among themselves and exchanging wide-eyed glances. Some clapped hesitantly, unsure if they were applauding Valerie's courage or simply acknowledging the drama that had unfolded live before their eyes. Backstage, producers scrambled frantically, pacing and whispering into their headsets as they attempted to regain control of the broadcast. Cut to commercial, one producer shouted, but in the brief seconds before the feed could be redirected, the tension lingered like a thick fog. The studio lights, usually warm and inviting, seemed almost harsh in their intensity, illuminating the strained expressions of everyone on set. Crew members exchanged quick, worried looks. Social media teams already began monitoring the first wave of tweets, knowing that the segment had instantly gone viral. Meanwhile, Valerie paused in the hallway just off the stage, her posture straight, her breathing steady. She felt the surge of adrenaline ebb slightly but remained acutely aware of the magnitude of her decision. Walking off live television wasn't something one did lightly, and she knew the repercussions would be immediate and far-reaching. But she also knew that maintaining her integrity, her boundaries, and her dignity was far more important than any fleeting discomfort caused by public perception. Her agent appeared at her side, whispering reassurances and attempting to gauge the network's response, but Valerie shook her head gently, signaling that she did not need mediation. I made my choice, she said quietly. This is about my story, not their agenda. Back in the studio, Hoda Kotb composed herself quickly, aware that the cameras were still rolling and that millions were watching from home. She straightened her notes, adjusted her microphone, and exhaled slowly, projecting calm authority despite the internal turbulence. Well, sometimes live television throws us curveballs, she said, her voice steady but tinged with the faintest tremor of uncertainty. And today, we certainly got one. The audience murmured, a mix of nervous chuckles and subdued applause, acknowledging Hoda's attempt to maintain control while still absorbing the shock of what had just transpired. Hoda gestured toward Savannah Guthrie, seated beside her, signaling the need to pivot the broadcast toward safer, lighter territory. Savannah, why don't we move to some uplifting stories from around the country? She suggested, her tone attempting to mask the residual tension while keeping the show flowing. Savannah nodded, offering a sympathetic smile, understanding the delicate balancing act that live television demanded. The cameras cut smoothly to a pre-planned segment, shifting focus to heartwarming stories about local communities, holiday preparations, and feel-good human interest pieces. Despite the shift, the atmosphere in the studio remained charged. Audience members exchanged whispers and excited glances, unable to fully shake the memory of Valerie's firm stance. Social media monitors backstage lit up with clips and gifs of the confrontation, many praising Valerie for asserting herself and maintaining composure under pressure. Tweets poured in from fans, journalists, and casual viewers alike, all dissecting the segment, some lauding her courage, others debating whether walking off live was appropriate, and a few speculating about behind-the-scenes tensions. The buzz was immediate, viral, and impossible to ignore. Valerie, seated in a quiet backstage lounge a short distance from the set, allowed herself a brief moment of relief. She sipped water, feeling the cool liquid soothe her throat, and reflected on the exchange.